Hello, boring dreamers. Today we are stepping into a time machine, but not for a vacation. We are going to the one place you absolutely never want to visit in the past, the doctor's office. We are traveling back to the Middle Ages to explore the terrifying, bizarre, and utterly ineffective world of medieval medicine. Imagine lying on a straw mattress, shivering with a fever, and looking up to see a man holding a rusted knife and a jar of leeches, telling you that your ghosts are in the wrong place. It's going to be messy. It's going to be painful. And honestly, you probably won't survive this, in fact. The cure is likely to kill you faster than the disease. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you are watching from and what time it is. I love imagining these stories echoing around the globe while the rest of the world sleeps. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up. The first thing you notice is the weight on your chest, heavy and suffocating, like a wet wool blanket. You try to take a deep breath, but it catches in your throat, turning into a dry, hacking cough that rattles your ribs. You are cold, yet your skin feels like it's burning. You are sick. In the modern world, you would reach for a thermometer, pop 2 ibuprofen, and maybe call in sick to work. But you are not in the modern world. You are in a drafty timber-framed house in the year 1350, and you have just realized that your body is betraying you. You call for help. A family member runs to fetch the local physician. You wait, staring up at the thatched roof, where the soot from the open fire has gathered in black, stalactite-like clumps. Eventually, the door creaks open. A man enters. He is wearing a long, dark robe, a sign of his university education, and a round cap. He doesn't carry a stethoscope or a blood pressure cuff. He carries a scroll of parchment and an air of absolute, unshakable confidence. He approaches your bedside, but he doesn't check your pulse immediately. He doesn't listen to your lungs. Instead, he looks at you with a critical, almost artistic eye, as if you are a painting that has been hung slightly crooked. "Ah," he says, nodding sagely, "I see the problem. You are out of balance." He is not talking about your equilibrium. He is talking about the fundamental substances that make up your existence. You are about to be diagnosed according to the theory of the 4 humors. This is a mainstream historical fact. For over 1,000 years, Western medicine was dominated by this single, all-encompassing theory derived from the ancient Greeks, Hippocrates, and Galen. They believed that the human body was essentially a container for 4 vital fluids, or humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health was defined as eucrasia, a perfect harmony of these fluids. Illness was dyscrasia, an imbalance. If you were sick, it wasn't because a virus had invaded your cells. It was because you had too much juice, or the wrong kind of juice, sloshing around inside you. The physician leans over you. He touches your forehead. "Hot," he mutters. He observes your flushed cheeks. "Red?" He steps back and consults his mental chart. You are hot and wet. In the medieval periodic table of the body, hot and wet corresponds to the element of air and the humor of blood. You are sanguine, he declares. You have a plethora of blood. It is boiling in your veins, creating this fever. We must cool you down and dry you out. You lie there, feverish and confused, wondering why having too much blood is a bad thing. But to him, it makes perfect sense. The body is a microcosm of the universe. Just as the world is made of earth, air, fire, and water, you are made of their biological equivalents. Blood is air, hot and wet. Phlegm is water, cold and wet. Yellow bile is fire, hot and dry. Black bile is earth, cold and dry. Your fever isn't an infection. It's a weather event. You are experiencing a personal heat wave because your internal air is expanding. If you were shivering and pale, he might diagnose you with an excess of phlegm, cold and wet, essentially accusing you of drowning in your own snot. If you were jaundiced and angry, he'd blame yellow bile. If you were depressed and lethargic, it was definitely black bile dragging you down like heavy earth. This system is elegant, poetic, and completely wrong. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. This theory was so ingrained in the culture that it didn't just dictate medicine. It dictated personality tests. We still use the words today. If you are sanguine, you are optimistic and social, like blood. If you are phlegmatic, you are calm and sluggish, like slime. If you are bilious, you are irritable. And if you are melancholic, you are sad. The word melancholy literally comes from the Greek melon, black, and chol, bile. So when you say you're feeling melancholy, you are historically saying, I am full of black vomit. The physician sits down on a three-legged stool, smoothing his robes. He explains that your imbalance could be caused by anything. Maybe you ate too many hot foods, like onions or pepper. Maybe you stood in a cold wind. Maybe the stars shifted. We'll get to that nightmare later. The point is, your container is overflowing, and he needs to drain it. You might wonder, why did this persist for so long if it failed to cure anyone? Well, it's because it was visually intuitive. When you draw blood into a glass jar and let it sit, it separates into layers. The dark clot at the bottom looks like black bile. The red layer is blood. The white blood cells form a buffy coat that looks like phlegm. And the clear serum on top looks yellow. To a medieval doctor, this was irrefutable proof. He could see the humors in the jar. He didn't know about red blood cells or platelets. He just saw a layered cocktail of human fluids and built a 1,000-year dogma around it. Historians still argue whether medieval physicians were strictly bound by this theory, or if they were more pragmatic than we give them credit for. Some scholars, like those analyzing the rational surgery movement of the 13th century, argue that battlefield doctors often ignored the humors and just treated the wound in front of them because you can't philosophize a severed artery back together. However, the university-educated elite de physique clung to Galen's texts like gospel. To question Galen was to question the fabric of reality. It would be like a modern physicist denying gravity. So even if the patient died, the theory remained perfect. It was the patient who failed to respond correctly. The doctor looks at you with a mix of pity and calculation. He knows he has to reduce your sanguine excess. But before he starts cutting you open or force-feeding you herbs, he needs more data. He needs to see the humors in action. He needs a sample. He reaches into his bag and pulls out a distinctively shaped glass flask. It has a round bottom and a long, slender neck. It looks like a piece of high-end chemistry equipment, but its purpose is decidedly unglamorous. He hands it to you. Fill this, he commands. You realize with a sinking feeling that your medical examination is about to move from the theoretical to the excretory. He doesn't want to draw blood just yet. He wants to look at your water. You are about to engage in the ancient art of uroscopy, where the color, smell, and heaven forbid, the taste of your urine will determine your fate. The doctor holds the glass up to the window light, swirling it like a fine brandy, preparing to read your future in the yellow liquid. You hand the warm glass flask back to the physician. He takes it with a practiced reverence, holding it by the long, slender neck. This flask is called a matola. It is bulbous at the bottom and narrow at the top, shaped intentionally to mimic the human bladder. In the medieval world, this object is the ultimate symbol of medicine. In the same way, a modern doctor wears a stethoscope around their neck to signal their authority. The medieval doctor is almost always depicted holding a flask of urine up to the light. It is his crystal ball, his diagnostic engine, and his primary source of income. He walks over to the window, or perhaps holds it up against the flickering light of a candle. He squints. He tilts the flask. He is not just checking to see if you are hydrated. He is performing a complex visual analysis that rivals a modern art critique. He is looking for color, consistency, and content. He pulls out a folded parchment from his robe. He unrolls it on the table. It is a circular diagram with 20 different colored roundels arranged around the edge, looking suspiciously like a paint swatch deck you might find at a hardware store. He holds your flask next to the wheel, trying to find a match. The colors range from clear as well water, which indicates poor digestion, to gold, healthy, to red as saffron, fever, all the way to black as mortified meat, death is imminent. He hums thoughtfully. He taps a roundel labeled Rufus, reddish gold. Ah, he mutters, the color of unmixed wine. Your blood is indeed overcooked. This is a mainstream historical fact. Uroscopy was the gold standard of diagnosis for centuries. Physicians believed that digestion was essentially a cooking process. The stomach was a cauldron that boiled food into hewers. Urine was the runoff, the way of the blood. By examining the runoff, they believed they could tell exactly how the cooking was going inside your liver and veins. If the urine was too pale, the fire was too low. If it was too dark, the fire was burning the food. It was a metabolic status report. But he isn't done with the color. He shakes the flask gently. He is looking for the sediment. In medieval uroscopy, the flask was divided into 4 regions, corresponding to the body. Sediments floating at the top represented the head. The middle represented the chest. The bottom represented the loins. He spots a cloudy swirl floating near the top of the flask. A nebula in the supreme region, he announces. You have vapors in your brain. You lie there, wondering if brain vapors are fatal. But the examination is about to get much more intimate. Visual inspection is only step 1. Step 2 involves the nose. The physician uncorks the flask and takes a deep, robust sniff. He inhales the bouquet of your waste as if you are judging a vintage Pinot Noir. He is looking for sweetness, sharpness, or the smell of rot. Pungent, he says, wrinkling his nose. Like sour apples. And now we reach the moment that makes you grateful for modern lab tech. The physician looks at the flask, looks at you, and decides the smell isn't conclusive enough. He needs to test the chemical composition directly. He extends his pinky finger, dips it into the warm yellow liquid, and yes, he puts it in his mouth. You watch in horror as he smacks his lips, rolling the sample over his tongue. He is tasting your pee. This isn't a fetish. It's a medical necessity. He is checking for viscosity and flavor. If it tastes sweet, like honey, it indicates a specific wasting disease. If it tastes salty, it indicates a drying of the humors. This brings us to a quirky, fringe tidbit. The sweet taste test was actually one of the few things they got right. A sweet taste meant the patient had diabetes mellitus, which literally translates to honey-sweet flow. The excess sugar in the blood of a diabetic spills over into the urine. While they couldn't treat it with insulin, they could at least identify it. However, they also believed they could diagnose chastity, pregnancy, and even future death by the taste. There were piss prophets who claimed they could look at a woman as urine and tell you the gender of her unborn child, or if she was a virgin. Spoiler, they were guessing. The physician spits into a rag. Salty, he concludes, and bitter. Your bile is agitated. He sets the flask down. The diagnosis is confirmed. You have a sanguine excess with biliary complications and vapors in the head. The uroscopy has told him what is wrong, but it hasn't told him when he can fix it. This is where the logic of the Middle Ages takes a sharp left turn into the supernatural. In the modern world, if you have a fever, the doctor treats you immediately. Right now, stat. But here, time is not measured in minutes. It is measured in celestial degrees. The physician cannot simply bleed you or give you a potion just because you are sick. He has to check if the universe is in the mood for surgery. He packs away his urine wheel and pulls out another scroll. This one is covered in star charts, moon phases, and a drawing of a human body covered in crabs, rams, and scorpions. He is consulting the almanac. Historians still argue regarding the prevalence of medical astrology. Some scholars argue that it was mostly a high-level academic pursuit, something the elite physicians talked about to justify their high fees, while the village healers just ignored it and treated the patient. Others argue that it was universal, that no surgeon would dare cut a patient without checking the moon, for fear of being sued for malpractice if the patient died during the wrong zodiac sign. In 14th century Paris, the medical faculty actually decreed that any physician who didn't consult the stars was negligent. The doctor runs his finger along the chart. The moon is entering Gemini, he mutters, frowning, and Mars is in the house of the ram. He looks at you with concern. This is bad news. You see, the body isn't just a bag of humors. It is a map of the zodiac. And if the moon is in the sign that rules a specific body part, you absolutely cannot touch that body part. It is governed by the stars. To cut into a body part while its star sign is dominant is to invite uncontrollable bleeding and death. You are about to learn that your anatomy is not your own. It belongs to the sky. And right now, the sky is telling the doctor that touching your arms might kill you. But your fever is high. He has to do something. He has to find a loophole in the heavens. You lie back on the straw, the taste of the bread still lingering in your mouth, watching the man decide your fate based on the position of a planet millions of miles away. You have survived the diagnosis. You have survived the tasting. But now, you have to survive the treatment. And the treatment begins with a map that looks less like a medical diagram and more like a horror movie poster. The physician unrolls the second scroll, smoothing it out on the rough wooden table beside your bed. You crane your neck to see what could possibly be more important than the fact that you are currently sweating through your linen undertunic. The image on the parchment is grotesque, surreal, and undeniably fascinating. It depicts a naked man, his body opened up and displayed not for anatomical study, but for celestial colonization. Standing on his head is a ram. Perched on his shoulders are two twins. A crab is digging its claws into his chest. A lion rests on his heart. You are looking at the Zodiac Man. This is the roadmap of medieval surgery. To you, it looks like a surrealist nightmare. To the doctor, it is a safety manual. You see, he explains, tracing a line from the moon symbol to the figure's arm. The macrocosm reflects the microcosm. As the heavens move, so do the fluids within you. This is a mainstream historical fact. Medieval medicine was fundamentally holistic, meaning you couldn't treat a human being in isolation from the universe. They believed that each sign of the zodiac governed a specific part of the human body. Aries ruled the head and eyes. Taurus ruled the neck and throat. Gemini ruled the shoulders and arms. Cancer the chest. Leo the heart. Virgo the stomach. Libra the hips and kidneys. Scorpio the genitals, naturally. Sagittarius the thighs. Capricorn the knees. Aquarius the ankles. Pisces the feet. The logic was based on tidal forces. They knew the moon pulled the tides of the ocean. Since the human body is full of humors, liquids, it stood to reason that the moon pulled on you too. If the moon was currently passing through the sign of Gemini, it meant the moon's gravitational pull was focused entirely on the arms. We have a problem, the physician says, tapping the chart. The moon is waxing, which pulls the blood outward to the surface. That is good for bleeding, but it is currently in Gemini. He looks at you gravely. Because Gemini rules the arms, and he needs to open a vein in your arm to let out the excess sanguine humor, he is in a bind. If he cuts into a body part that is currently being ruled by the moon, the attractive force of the celestial body will be too strong. The blood won't just flow. It will rush out in an uncontrollable torrent. You will hemorrhage and die, and it will be entirely his fault for ignoring the sky. You lie there, feeling the fever burn behind your eyes, realizing that your medical treatment is being delayed by a horoscope. In the modern world, surgery is delayed by insurance authorization. In the Middle Ages, it is delayed because the moon is in the house of the twins. The physician pulls out a small device from his pocket. It looks like a paper computer. It's a set of rotating paper discs pinned together in the center, known as a volval. He spins the top disc, aligning the current date with the position of the sun and the moon. He is calculating the aspects. He is trying to find a window of time, perhaps just a few hours, where the moon moves out of the critical degree, or where a benevolent planet like Jupiter might intervene to block the bad vibes of Gemini. You watch him do the math. He mutters about trines and squares. He is literally calculating your survival odds using geometry. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. This reliance on timing was so precise that some medieval medical texts included folding almanacs that doctors could hang from their belts. These weren't just calendars, they were liability waivers. If a patient died on the operating table, the first thing the doctor did was pull out his almanac and prove to the family and the guild that he had cut at the astronomically correct time. Look, he would argue, Mars was in trine with Venus. The surgery should have worked. God simply decided otherwise. It was the ultimate way to shift the blame from the surgeon's shaky hand to the unchangeable will of the cosmos. The doctor sighs. The aspect is difficult, he admits, but we cannot wait for the moon to leave Gemini. That will take 2 days, and by then, your fever will have cooked your brain. He decides he must compromise. He cannot bleed the main vein in the arm, the cephalic vein, because that is too risky under Gemini. He must choose a diversionary bleed. He looks at your feet. Pisces rules the feet. The moon is far away from Pisces right now. It is a safe zone. We will bleed from the ankle, he decides. It will draw the heat down from the head, distracting the humors without offending the stars. You wiggle your toes nervously. You wanted a cure for your fever, and now you are getting your ankle sliced because a crab and a set of twins are fighting in the sky. Historians still argue regarding the extent to which this was practiced versus how much was academic posturing. Some scholars argue that the zodiac man was largely a mnemonic device for students, a way to memorize anatomy, and that in the urgency of a plague outbreak or a battlefield, nobody was checking the moon. However, court records tell a different story. There are documented cases of physicians being sued for malpractice specifically because they operated during a forbidden sign. It suggests that the public knew the rules and expected them to be followed. If grandma died because you bled her during a full moon, you were going to pay. The physician packs away his volval and his charts. The decision has been made. The diagnosis is sanguine excess. The timing is suboptimal but manageable. The location is the ankle. He stands up and rolls up his sleeves. The theoretical part of your visit is over. The tasting, the smelling, the stargazing, that was the easy part. That was the consultation. Now comes the intervention. He turns to his bag and opens it. The metallic clink of instruments makes your stomach turn. He pulls out a small, flat bowl made of pewter. He places it on the floor near your foot. Then, he reaches for a jar. It is dark, filled with water and ... movement. Ideally, he says, we would use the lancet. But given the moon's position, we need a slower, gentler draw. We need nature's surgeons. You know what is coming. You saw the jar. You know what is swimming in there. You try to pull your foot back, but you are too weak. The physician uncorks the jar. He isn't going to cut you with a knife, not yet. He is going to let a parasite do the work for him. You are about to become a feeding ground. You watch, paralyzed by a mixture of feverish lethargy and primal fear, as the physician dips his hand into the dark jar. The water inside churns. He pulls out a creature that looks like a glistening black ribbon of living muscle. It writhes between his fingers, searching for a purchase. This is Hirudo medicinalis, the medicinal leech. To you, it is a swamp monster. To the medieval medical establishment, it is a precision instrument, a pharmaceutical factory, and a divine gift all rolled into one slimy package. The ankle, the physician reminds you, lifting your foot onto his lap. Pisces is safe. The moon will not object. He places the leech against your skin, right over a pulsing blue vein near your ankle bone. You brace yourself for pain. You expect a bite. But what you feel is surprisingly subtle, a tiny, sharp prick like a mosquito landing, followed by a strange, cool sensation. You don't recoil in agony. You just watch in horrified fascination as the leech anchors itself. It arches its back, drives its three-jawed mouth into your flesh, and begins to feed. This is a mainstream historical fact. The medicinal leech is an evolutionary masterpiece of stealth. Its saliva contains a potent cocktail of bioactive chemicals. First, it releases a local anesthetic, so the host, that's you, doesn't feel the bite and smack it away. Second, it releases hirudin, a powerful anticoagulant that prevents your blood from clotting. This ensures a steady, free-flowing meal for the leech. In the medieval mind, this wasn't just biology. It was the leech drawing out the bad humors. They believed the worm instinctively knew which blood was corrupt and sucked only the poison, leaving the healthy blood behind. You watch the creature expand. It transforms from a slender ribbon into a bloated, dark red sausage. It is heavy now, filled with your sanguine excess. The physician nods approvingly. He sees the therapy working. You, however, are starting to feel a little lightheaded. But one leech is slow work. The physician is impatient. The fever is high, and he needs to bring your temperature down quickly. He decides that the worm is good for finesse, but for volume, he needs steel. He places the leech back in the jar, or perhaps leaves it there to finish its meal, and reaches for his belt. He pulls out a small leather case. Inside glints a double-edged blade. This is the fleam or lancet. We need a freer flow, he mutters. The humor is stubborn. He ties a strip of linen tightly around your calf, just below the knee. He waits a moment. He taps the vein in your foot. It bulges, trapped by the tourniquet. This is phlebotomy bloodletting. It is the most common medical procedure in the history of the world, practiced from ancient Egypt until the late 19th century. If you had a headache, bleed, indigestion, bleed, plague, bleed until you pass out, it was the turn it off and on again of pre-modern medicine. He positions the blade. He doesn't count to 3. He just flicks his wrist. Snick, you gasp. This hurts more than a leech. A warm, wet heat instantly washes over your foot. The physician holds the pewter bowl under the cut. Drip, drip, drip. Then, a steady stream. The sound of your own life force hitting the metal bowl is rhythmic and terrifying. Plink, plink, plink. He watches the blood fill the bowl. He isn't just measuring the volume. He is inspecting the quality. See? He points to the swirling liquid. It is dark, thick, melancholic. It was right to let it out. In reality, venous blood is always darker than arterial blood because it's oxygen depleted. But to him, this darkness proves that you are full of bad blood. It confirms his diagnosis. He lets the bowl fill. 5 ounces, 10 ounces. You start to feel your vision swim. The room grows dimmer. The fever actually seems to abate, replaced by a cold clamminess. You interpret this as a cure. The heat is leaving. Historians still argue regarding the physiological effects of bloodletting. For decades, modern medicine dismissed it as pure quackery that killed more patients than it saved. George Washington famously died after being drained of nearly 40% of his blood for a throat infection. However, Some scholars argue that it might have had a temporary beneficial effect for certain conditions. By lowering blood volume, you lower blood pressure. You also induce a state of shock, which lowers body temperature. So if you had a raging fever and high blood pressure, bloodletting would technically cool you down and make you feel calmer, red, closer to death. It was a symptomatic relief that masked the fact that your immune system was collapsing. The physician decides you have bled enough. He unties the tourniquet. He presses a pad of raw wool or linen onto the cut to staunch the flow. He might apply a bit of spiderweb, which is actually rich in vitamin K and helps clotting, to seal the wound. There, he says, wiping his blade on his robe. The pressure is relieved. But where did the leech come from? This brings us to a quirky fringe tidbit. The leech collector. This was a real job, and it was almost exclusively performed by poor women in the countryside. To catch the leeches, these women would wade into freezing, murky marshes with their bare legs. They would stand still, acting as human bait. The leeches would attach to their legs, and the women would peel them off and put them in baskets. It was a miserable, anemic existence. They were often covered in scars and suffered from chronic infections. So, every time a wealthy merchant got a headache cured, a peasant woman paid for it with her own blood in a swamp. You lie back, feeling weak. The bowl of blood sits on the table, a grim trophy of your treatment. You are lighter, yes. Your head is spinning, yes. But the pounding pressure behind your eyes, the original vapors, hasn't gone away. If anything, the headache is sharper now, piercing through the fog of blood loss. The physician notices you rubbing your temples. He frowns. The bleeding should have fixed this. If the sanguine removal didn't work, then the problem must be deeper. It must be trapped. The vapors are not in the blood, he muses, leaning over you with a look of terrifying realization. They are trapped in the skull. The bone is holding the demons in. He packs away his lancet. He reaches into the bottom of his bag for a heavier tool. It looks like a carpentry brace, a hand-cranked drill with a jagged, circular bit at the end. We must give the spirits a door, he whispers. You freeze. You know what this is. You have heard stories of the head operation. He is suggesting trepanation. He wants to drill a hole in your skull. And the worst part? He isn't going to put you to sleep for it. He is just going to ask you to hold very, very still. You stare at the instrument in the physician's hand. It is a T-shaped handle made of heavy oak, connected to a metal shaft that ends in a jagged circular saw bit. This is a tree fine. It looks like something you would use to bore a hole in a wine barrel, or perhaps to assemble furniture. But the physician is not looking at your furniture. He is looking at your forehead. The pressure must be released, he says, his voice calm and terrifyingly reasonable. The vapors are trapped between the duramater and the skull. We must open a chimney for the smoke. You try to scramble backward on the bed, kicking at the straw, but the bloodletting has left you weak. The physician nods to his assistant's burly apprentices, who double as living restraints. They step forward. One grabs your shoulders. The other pins your legs. You are trapped. In the modern world, this would be a scene from a horror movie in a basement. In the Middle Ages, this is the pinnacle of neurosurgery. The physician approaches. He doesn't offer you a sedative, because he doesn't have one that works fast enough. He offers you a leather strap. Bite, he commands. You clamp your teeth down on the salty, sweat-stained leather. It is the only pain management you are going to get. He produces a razor. With quick, dry scrapes, he shaves a patch of hair right on the top of your head, or perhaps near the temple where the pain is sharpest. The cold air hits your bare scalp. He takes a piece of charcoal and draws a small circle on your skin. X marks the spot. He positions the drill. The metal tip presses into your skin. You whimper against the strap. He places his hand on the top of the handle, and then he begins to turn. Grind, grind, grind. The first sensation is a sharp, tearing pain as the teeth of the saw cut through the scalp. Blood runs down your face, blinding you, dripping into your ears. But then the sound changes. The drill hits the bone. You don't feel pain in the bone itself. Bone has no nerve endings. What you feel is vibration. A deep, rattling vibration that shakes your entire skull. It sounds like someone is crunching gravel inside your ears. The physician leans his weight into it. He is manually boring through the thickest protection your body has. You can hear the scritch of the metal biting into the calcium. Then comes the smell. Friction generates heat. The smell of bone dust is distinct. It smells like burning hair or singed hooves. It fills your nose, mixing with the metallic scent of the blood. You are smelling your own skull being pulverized. This is a mainstream historical fact. Trepanation is one of the oldest surgical procedures in human history. We have found trepanned skulls dating back to the Neolithic era, around 6500 BC. It was practiced on every continent. In the Middle Ages, it was the go-to treatment for skull fractures to lift depressed bone fragments, epilepsy, migraines, and madness. The theory was simple. If there is a demon or a bad humor inside, give it a door to leave. They believed the pneuma, vital spirit, was blocked, and the hole would restore the flow. The physician stops turning. He pulls the drill out and blows the white dust away. He checks the depth. He has to be incredibly careful. If he pushes too hard, he will plunge the drill bit into your brain, killing you instantly or leaving you permanently paralyzed. He is aiming for the dura mater, the tough membrane that protects the brain. He wants to expose it, not puncture it. He resumes drilling. You are in a trance of agony and shock. The vibration is mesmerizing. You wonder if this is how you die. But then, a sudden pop. The resistance gives way. He has broken through the inner table of the skull. He uses a small lever to pry out the circular disc of bone. He holds it up to the candlelight. A bloody white button of you. "Behold," he whispers. The door is open. You feel a strange sensation. The throbbing pressure is ... gone? Is it the placebo effect? Is it the relief of the drill stopping? Or did he actually relieve an intracranial hematoma? You don't know. You just know that the air is hitting a part of your anatomy that should never see the light of day. Here is a quirky, fringe tidbit. Surprisingly, trepanation had a high survival rate. Archaeologists have found hundreds of medieval skulls with trepanation holes that show significant bone regrowth around the edges. This proves the patients lived for years, or even decades, after the surgery. In fact, some skulls have multiple holes, meaning the person went back for a second or third procedure. "Hey doc, the headache is back. Drill another one." Even stranger, the little discs of bone removed during the surgery called rondelles were sometimes kept by the patient. They were drilled and worn on a necklace as a lucky charm or an amulet to ward off evil spirits. You literally wore a piece of your own head as jewelry. The physician peers into the hole. He claims to see a dark vapor escaping. "The demon flees," he announces triumphantly. In reality, he is probably seeing the pulsing of your brain membranes, which is terrifying enough. But now he has a new problem. He has created a hole in your head. He can't just leave it open to the air, or flies will lay eggs in your brain, a legitimate medieval fear. He needs to cover it. He places a piece of gold foil or a flattened lead coin over the dura mater to protect it. Then he stitches the scalp flap back over the hole, leaving a small gap for drainage. You slump back on the bed, exhausted, blood-soaked, and lighter by a few grams of bone. You have survived the most invasive surgery of the era. You are a member of the Trepanation Club, but your ordeal isn't over. You now have an open surgical wound in a world without antibiotics. The physician wipes his hands. He needs to dress the wound. He needs to apply a poultice to prevent infection and encourage healing. And this is where the logic of medieval medicine takes a dive from misguided but mechanical into absolutely repulsive. He doesn't reach for alcohol or clean linen. He reaches for a jar that smells worse than the latrine. He believes in the power of sympathetic magic and the potency of biological waste. To cure a wound, you need something strong. And in his mind, nothing is stronger than the digestive byproduct of a farm animal. We must apply the pharmacy of the earth, he says, scooping out a handful of a brown fibrous paste. You recoil. The smell hits you instantly. It is unmistakable. You have just had a hole drilled in your head, and now, to save you, he is about to smear dung directly into the cut. Historians still argue regarding the reasoning behind dung cures. Some scholars suggest it was based on the idea of fighting fire with fire, using a foul substance to drive out the foul corruption of disease. Others argue it was a misunderstanding of the heat generated by decomposing manure. They thought the heat was life energy that would stimulate healing. A few fringe theories even suggest that certain molds growing on dung might have had weak antibiotic properties like primitive penicillin, but mostly it was just a great way to get tetanus. You close your eyes as the warm, smelly paste is applied to your scalp. You are too weak to fight. You just hope that the demon who left your head doesn't decide to come back when he smells the new decor. You have survived the drill. Now you must survive the cure. You grit your teeth as the physician slathers the warm, pungent paste directly onto your raw scalp. The smell is overwhelming, a thick, ammonia-heavy scent of the stable that makes your eyes water. You try to hold your breath, but the physician is thorough. He packs the medicine around the edges of the incision, sealing the hole in your head with the literal waste of a farm animal. The heat of the dung will draw out the cold poison, he reassures you, wiping his hands on a rag that is arguably dirtier than the dung. You are now the proud recipient of a treatment from the Drecapothic, the pharmacy of filth. In the modern world, we are obsessed with sterility. We scrub, we bleach, we autoclave. But in the medieval world, the concept of sterile did not exist. Instead, they operated on the principle of potency. They believed that substances with strong smells and strong reactions had strong healing powers. And nothing smells stronger or reacts more visibly by steaming and decomposing than excrement. This is a mainstream historical fact. The use of feces, urine, and other bodily fluids in medicine was not a fringe practice for the desperate poor. It was standard medical protocol, appearing in the most respected textbooks of the era. It was known as stercorary medicine. The most prized ingredient was pigeon dung. Why? Because medieval physicians observed that pigeon dung burned the ground it landed on due to high ammonia content. Therefore, in the logic of the humors, it was intensely hot. If you had a cold, ailment like a lethargic swelling or a hardened tumor, you applied pigeon dung to cook it away. You are essentially undergoing chemical chemotherapy, but the chemical is bird poop. The dung on your head begins to tingle. You interpret this as healing. In reality, it is the ammonia irritating your open wound and the bacteria in the manure throwing a party in your bloodstream. But the physician isn't done. He notices you have a sore throat, perhaps from the smoke or the screaming during the drilling. Open, he commands. He holds up a small, white, chalky lump. It looks like a rough pill or a piece of limestone. You open your mouth, trusting him. He places it on your tongue. It tastes dry, powdery, and faintly acrid. Swallow, he says. It is album Greecum. That sounds fancy, doesn't it? Latin makes everything sound legitimate. Album Greecum translates to Greek white. It sounds like an expensive mineral imported from Athens. It is not. It is dog feces that has been left out in the sun until it turns white and crumbly. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. Album Greecum was a pharmacy staple well into the 18th century. It was specifically prescribed for quinsy, a severe abscess of the tonsils, and inflammation of the throat. The logic was baffling but consistent. The dog eats bones. The bones pass through the dog. The sun purifies the waste. Therefore, the white powder is bone essence. It can stiffen and cure the soft swollen tissues of the throat. You are eating sun-dried, bone-infused dog poop to cure strep throat, and you paid good money for it. The physician packs up his jar of dung. He seems satisfied. He has drilled a hole in your head to let the spirits out and packed it with manure to keep the cold out. He has fed you white dog poop. He is a man of science. But the pharmacy of filth wasn't limited to solids. Fluids were just as important. If you had an earache, the prescription might be to pour a few drops of warm urine into the ear canal. If you had a sty in your eye, you might be told to rub it with the tail of a black cat, superstition, or wash it with your own saliva, enzymatic, so actually not totally crazy. There was even a drink called mummy water, which wasn't the ground-up mummy we discussed earlier, but rather water that had been used to wash a corpse. It was believed to transfer the stillness of death to a patient who was too lively, i.e., manic or feverish. You lie back on the straw, the poultice on your head radiating a moist, uncomfortable heat. You feel degraded. You feel dirty. But you also feel a strange sense of belonging. In a world where privacy is non-existent, can everyone sleeps in the same bed? The boundaries between bodies and their waste products are porous. Your waste is my fertilizer. My waste is your medicine. It is a closed-loop system of biological recycling. Historians still argue regarding the efficacy and safety of Dracopothic. Most modern bacteriologists look at these recipes and scream. Applying manure to an open wound is the most efficient way to contract tetanus, E. coli, and gangrene. It is practically a suicide attempt. However, some anthropologists and immunologists suggest a controversial counter-theory, the hygiene hypothesis on steroids. They argue that constant exposure to this level of filth from birth might have hypercharged the medieval immune system. Perhaps the people who survived childhood were so biologically tough that a little bit of dung on the head was just a Tuesday. Furthermore, some molds that grow on dung, like penicillium, do have antibiotic properties. Is it possible they were accidentally inventing penicillin centuries early? Unlikely, given the randomness, but it's a tantalizing thought that they were almost right for the wrong reasons. The physician leaves you to rest. The sun dips lower in the sky. The pain in your head has dulled to a heavy throb, likely due to the shock and the placebo effect of the ritual. But as evening approaches, you notice a new problem. You scratch your arm. The skin feels itchy. You look down. You see a rash spreading. It's red, scaly, and angry. Maybe it's a reaction to the leech. Maybe it's the bedbugs in the straw. Or maybe it's a sign of something more sinister, like the great pox, syphilis, that would ravage Europe in later centuries, though in 1350. You're a bit early for that, so let's call it leprosy or eczema. You know you need to treat this skin condition. The dung didn't work on the rash. It just made it smell. You need something that dries, something that purifies, something that lasts. You remember the apothecary's shop. You remember the jars of heavy, shimmering liquids and powders. You need the heavy artillery of medieval dermatology. You are done with organic cures. You are done with herbs and poop. You want the stuff that feels like magic. You want metal. You are about to make a decision that will clear up your skin beautifully, right before it drives you insane and shuts down your kidneys. You are going to slather yourself in the elements of the periodic table that have skull and crossbones stickers on them today. Get ready to glow, metaphorically. You are about to enter the era of heavy metal cures. You look down at the angry, red rash spreading across your forearm. It's scaly, it's itchy, and in the dim light of the cottage, it looks disturbingly like the first signs of leprosy. Panic sets in. In the Middle Ages, leprosy isn't just a disease. It's a social death sentence. If the neighbors see this, they won't just shun you. The priest might hold a living funeral for you, declare you legally dead, and banish you to a colony with nothing but a clapper to warn people of your approach. You need this gone. Fast. You reach for a small pot you bought from the apothecary earlier, the one you ignored in favor of the dung. It is heavy for its size, made of thick stoneware. You pry off the wax seal. Inside is a thick, grayish-white paste. It smells metallic and sharp. This is unguentum saracenum, Saracen ointment, or perhaps a simple lead cerus. You scoop out a generous dollop. It feels dense and cool against your feverish skin. You smear it over the rash, rubbing it in until your arm is coated in a ghostly white film. Almost immediately, the itching stops. You sigh in relief. The redness fades under the opaque cover. You think, this is a miracle. You are right. It is a miracle that you aren't dead yet. You have just applied a high dose of lead and mercury directly to your largest organ. This is a mainstream historical fact. Heavy metals were the heavy lifters of medieval dermatology. Lead, in the form of white lead or lead acetate, was prized for its drying and cooling properties. Remember the humors? Skin eruptions were hot and wet. Lead is cold and dry. It was the perfect philosophical antidote. Mercury, quicksilver, was used for anything that looked like a parasite or a deep infection because it was toxic enough to kill living things, unfortunately, including the patient. As the paste settles into your pores, the chemistry experiment begins. The lead is absorbed into your bloodstream. Once there, it mimics calcium. Your body, confused but efficient, grabs the lead atoms and stores them in your bones and teeth, where they will stay for decades. But before they get stored, they circulate. They interfere with your enzymes. They attack your red blood cells, leading to anemia, the pallor of the rich. They degrade the myelin sheaths of your neurons. But the immediate effect is cosmetic perfection. Your skin looks smooth, pale, and alabaster white. This is why Queen Elizabeth I used Venetian cerus, a mix of white lead and vinegar, to achieve her iconic look. She was slowly poisoning herself for beauty, corroding her skin to the point where she had to apply thicker and thicker layers to hide the damage caused by the makeup itself. It was a toxic feedback loop. You admire your pale, non-itchy arm, but you feel a bit off. Your stomach cramps. You have a metallic taste in your mouth, like you've been sucking on a penny. Your gums feel tender. These are the classic signs of acute heavy metal poisoning. But you don't stop, because if lead is good, mercury is better. The physician mentioned that if the rash persists, you should use gray salve. This is mercury mixed with pork fat. You apply a bit of that too, just to be safe. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. The obsession with mercury reached its peak with the arrival of syphilis in Europe in the late 15th century, a bit later than our 1350 timeline, but the principle applies. The saying was, one night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury. Patients were literally put in fluxing tubs, saunas where they sat in a tent with a pot of boiling mercury, inhaling the fumes. They would salivate uncontrollably, drooling pints of saliva a day. The doctors cheered. They thought the disease was leaving through the spit. In reality, the patient's teeth were falling out and their jaws were rotting from mercury toxicity. But hey, the syphilis sores cleared up, mostly because the Treponema bacteria also hates mercury. You are now a walking hazmat zone. Your head has a hole in it packed with dung. Your stomach is full of dog poop. Your arm is coated in lead. Your blood is full of mercury. You are a chemical disaster. But the medieval mind doesn't see poison. It sees power. These materials are rare. They come from the earth. They are transformed by fire, alchemy. Therefore, they must have the power to transform the body. If it burns, it's working. If it makes you sick, It's just the crisis of the disease leaving your body. Historians still argue regarding the madness of heavy metal usage. Were people simply ignorant? Not entirely. They knew lead was dangerous to miners. They knew mercury drove hatters mad. But they viewed it as a risk-reward calculation. In a world where a simple scratch could kill you, remember Section 5? A dangerous cure was better than no cure. And honestly, lead acetate does work as an astringent. It does stop itching. It works just enough to keep you using it until it kills you. The sun sets on your chemically treated body. You feel lethargic, a symptom of the lead, but you interpret it as a peaceful rest. You decide you need something to help you sleep, something to take the edge off the lingering headache from the trepanation. You need a sedative. You look at the shelf of herbs in the cottage, or perhaps you revisit the apothecary in your mind. You see a jar of dried berries. They look like blueberries, but darker, shinier. The physician said they were for pain. He called them Dwale ingredients. You are about to transition from mineral poisons to botanical ones. You are about to brew a tea that contains some of the most lethal alkaloids found in nature. You think you are taking an aspirin. You are actually taking a dose of belladonna, hemlock, and opium. You reach for the jar. Just a few berries, you think, to help me sleep. You are about to learn that in the medieval garden, the line between a salad and a suicide note is incredibly thin. You stand before the rough wooden table in your cottage, the flickering rushlight casting long dancing shadows against the wattled walls. Your arm, coated in white lead and mercury, feels numb and heavy, a sensation you mistakenly attribute to healing rather than nerve damage. But the headache from the trepanation is still there, a dull rhythmic thumping behind your eyes. You need sleep. You need oblivion. And since you don't have a bottle of Ambien, you are going to rely on the medieval equivalent, a handful of dried leaves and berries that you bought from the apothecary or perhaps gathered yourself from the edges of the local graveyard. You drop the ingredients into a cup of hot water or wine. You watch them swirl, dark berries, jagged leaves, maybe a piece of a strange human-shaped root. You are brewing a tea. It smells earthy, bitter, and faintly sweet. You lift the cup to your lips. Stop. Look at what is in that cup. You are holding a botanical cocktail that would make a modern toxicologist weep. You are about to ingest the Solanaceae family, the nightshades. In the modern world, this family gives us potatoes and tomatoes. In the Middle Ages, it gave people hallucinations, cardiac arrest, and death. The first ingredient you likely included is Atropa belladonna, deadly nightshade. The berries look delicious, shiny, black, and sweet tasting. One of nature's cruelest tricks, as most poisons taste bitter. You might have added them because the physician told you they calm the nerves. And he is technically right. They calm the nerves by shutting down your parasympathetic nervous system. This is a mainstream historical fact. The name belladonna means beautiful lady in Italian. Renaissance women would drop distilled nightshade into their eyes to force their pupils to dilate. Large, dark pupils were considered seductive and alluring. They were literally poisoning their eyeballs for fashion. But the active ingredient, atropine, also causes blurred vision, rapid heartbeat, dry mouth, and confusion. So, you might look like a doe-eyed beauty, but you're stumbling around bumping into furniture and talking to people who aren't there. You take a sip. The liquid is bitter. Almost immediately, your mouth goes dry. Not just thirsty dry, but desert dry. This is the atropine drying up your salivary glands. You interpret this as the medicine drying out your bad humors. But you didn't just stop at belladonna. You wanted a strong sleep. So you added hemlock, Conium maculatum. Yes, the same plant that killed Socrates. Hemlock acts differently. It is a creeping paralytic. It starts at your feet and works its way up. Your legs feel heavy, then your arms. It slowly shuts down the muscles while your mind remains clear. right until it hits your diaphragm and you stop breathing. But in small doses, it's a muscle relaxant. The trick is knowing where the relaxant dose ends and the execution dose begins. And finally, the star of the show, opium. The medieval world was awash in poppy tears. It was the only true painkiller they had. It works. It mimics the body's endorphins. It stops the pain of the hole in your skull and the chemical burns on your arm. But mixed with alcohol, wine, and muscle relaxants, hemlock, it creates a potent respiratory depressant. You finish the cup. You stagger to the bed. The room starts to feel ... soft. The edges of your vision blur. You feel a strange sensation of weightlessness. You feel like you are floating a few inches above the straw mattress. This sensation of flying is a classic symptom of tropane alkaloid poisoning from the nightshades. It creates a dissociative hallucination of movement. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. Many historians and folklorists believe that the image of the witch on a broomstick comes directly from these herbal ointments. Flying ointment was a real substance, a salve made of belladonna, henbane, and mandrake suspended in animal fat. When women, or men, applied this salve to their skin, specifically to mucous membranes where it absorbed quickly, they would pass out and experience vivid dreams of flying, attending banquets, or dancing with beasts. When they woke up, they were convinced they had actually traveled. The broomstick part? Well, let's just say they needed an applicator to get the ointment onto. Sensitive areas. And a wooden staff was a common household tool. You are essentially tripping on the same chemistry that fueled the witch trials. As you lie there, hovering in your chemical trance, you might wonder about the root you saw in the jar. The mandrake, Mandragora officinarum. It is the most famous and feared plant in the medieval pharmacy. Why? Because the root looks like a little human. It has legs, arms, and sometimes a head. The doctrine of signatures, the belief that a plant looks like the body part it cures, suggested that because mandrake looked like a whole person, it could cure the whole person. It was the ultimate panacea, but getting it was a nightmare. Medieval folklore insisted that the mandrake root screamed when pulled from the earth. A scream so terrible that anyone who heard it would instantly drop dead. So how did they harvest it? They didn't use earplugs. They used a dog. The harvester would dig around the root to loosen it, then tie a cord around the plant and attach the other end to a dog's collar. They would throw a piece of meat just out of the dog's reach and then run away, or plug their ears with wax. The dog would lunge for the meat, pulling the root out of the ground. The plant would scream, the dog would die, allegedly, and the human could then safely pick up the magical root. You are drinking a tea that, according to local belief, required a canine sacrifice to obtain. You turn over in bed, your limbs feeling like lead. The pain in your head is gone, replaced by a fuzzy, warm void. You are successfully sedated, but are you safe? Historians still argue regarding the dosage problem. Did medieval wise women and apothecaries actually know the safe doses? Or was it just a game of roulette? Some scholars argue that these traditional healers possessed a deep, empirical knowledge passed down orally. They knew exactly which time of year to pick the leaves when potency was lower and how to dilute them safely. They argue that the high death rates recorded by later physicians were actually a smear campaign to discredit female healers. However, other historians point out that plants vary wildly in potency depending on soil, rain, and sunlight. One hemlock plant might be mild. The one next to it might be lethal. Without standardized chemical extraction, every cup of tea was a gamble. You couldn't titrate a leaf. Your breathing slows, shallow, irregular. You are on the edge of the dwyle sleep. Dwyle was a specific medieval anesthetic drink used for surgery, often containing bile, lettuce, vinegar, and hemlock. It was famous for being dangerous. There are accounts of patients being given dwale for surgery, and simply never waking up. The surgeon would finish the amputation, bandage the stump, and then realize the patient had stopped breathing an hour ago. But you, being the protagonist of our survival story, have a strong constitution, or perhaps you didn't steep the tea long enough. You hover in the twilight zone. You see shapes in the dark, perhaps the mare sitting on your chest again, or perhaps just the optical distortions of the atropine. You giggle. You weep. You feel the bed spinning. Eventually, the toxicity peaks and begins to fade, or your liver manages to process enough of the poison to keep your heart beating. You drift into a true, heavy, dreamless sleep, the kind of coma-like slumber that only heavy narcotics can provide. Hours pass. The sun rises on day ... whatever day it is. You lose track of time when you are on nightshades. You wake up thirsty. Your tongue feels like sandpaper. Your pupils are likely still dilated, making the morning light blindingly painful. You try to sit up, and your head swims. But as the fog clears, you realize something terrible. The pain in your head from the drill is gone, masked by the drugs. The itch on your arm is gone, masked by the lead. But there is a new pain. A sharp, piercing electric jolt that shoots through your jaw every time you close your mouth. You probe the back of your mouth with your tongue. A molar. It feels loose. It feels hot. And it hurts more than the hole in your skull ever did. In the modern world, a toothache is an annoyance. In the medieval world, it is a crisis. There are no dentists. There are no fillings. There is only the barber surgeon and his pliers. But before you resort to the yank and pray method, you have to try the home remedy. You have to treat the cause of the pain. And everyone knows what causes a toothache. It's not sugar. It's not bacteria. It's a worm. A tiny, evil worm that has burrowed into your tooth and is gnawing on the nerve. You drag yourself out of bed. You need to fumigate your own face. You need to smoke the worm out. You are about to engage in one of the most persistent and bizarre medical myths of history. Get ready to inhale burning seeds and look for imaginary bugs in a bowl of water. You stumble to the hearth, clutching your jaw. The pain is absolute. It is a rhythmic electric pulse that seems to originate in your molar and radiate directly into your ear canal. It feels as if something is alive in there, thrashing and biting its way through the bone. And in your medieval worldview, that is exactly what is happening. You do not have a cavity caused by Streptococcus mutans fermenting sugar into acid. You have a tooth worm. You are certain of it. You have seen worms in apples. You have seen worms in wood. The holes they leave look exactly like the hole in your tooth. Therefore, by the transitive property of medieval logic, there is a tiny, malevolent maggot living in your head, and you need to evict it. You cannot just pull the tooth yet. That is the nuclear option. You want to save the tooth if possible. So, you prepare for a fumigation. You need to make the environment inside your mouth so smoky, toxic, and inhospitable that the worm decides to leave of its own accord. You rake through the ashes of the fire to find a large, flat stone or a piece of brick. You place it right in the center of the hottest coals until it glows with a dull red heat. While it heats, you fetch a bowl of water and place it on the table. You then reach for a small pouch of seeds. These aren't just any seeds. They are henbane, Hyoscyamus niger. We met henbane earlier as an ingredient in your flying ointment, but here it plays a dual role. It is a mild analgesic painkiller, and it is the special effects budget for the magic trick you are about to perform. You use a pair of tongs to pull the hot stone from the fire. You set it down next to the bowl of water. You sprinkle a pinch of the henbane seeds directly onto the glowing rock. Immediately, a thick, acrid smoke rises. It smells heavy, musky, and foul. You lean over the stone, opening your mouth wide. You might use a funnel made of pottery or wood to direct the plume of smoke directly onto the offending tooth. You inhale deeply. You hold the smoke in your mouth, swishing it around the rotting molar. Your eyes water. Your throat burns. You cough, sputtering saliva, and smoke into the bowl of water beneath your chin. You do this for several minutes. You are essentially tear-gassing yourself. But then, as the smoke clears and you wipe your streaming eyes, you look down into the water bowl. And there they are. Floating in the water are tiny, white, wriggling shapes. They look like miniature maggots with black heads. You gasp in triumph. You have done it. You have smoked out the colony. You stare at the worms in the water, feeling a profound sense of vindication. The pain in your jaw seems to recede lightly because the henbane smoke has mildly anesthetized the nerve endings in your gums. You are cured. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. You have just been scammed by botany. Henbane seeds have a peculiar property. When they are heated on a hot surface, they burst open. The white, curled embryo inside the seed is expelled with force. When these embryos land in water, they rehydrate and untwist slightly. To the naked eye, they look exactly like tiny, dead worms. Medieval charlatans knew this. They would travel from town to town, performing worm removals in the market square. They would have the patient inhale the smoke, point to the burst seeds in the water, and say, "Look at the beasts I have drawn from your head." The patient, seeing the physical evidence, would pay happily. It was the placebo effect reinforced by a prop. This is a mainstream historical fact. The belief in the tooth worm was nearly universal. It appears in texts from ancient Mesopotamia, the legend of the worm, Egypt, China, and throughout medieval Europe. It wasn't just a folk belief. It was taught in medical schools. Guy de Chauliac, the 14th century surgeon to the popes, wrote about fumigating for worms using henbane, leeks, and onion seeds. The worm theory explained the pain perfectly. The gnawing sensation was the worm eating, and the sudden sharp stabs were the worm twisting. It was a logical, visible explanation for invisible agony. You sit back, feeling groggy from the fumes. The henbane is a deliriant, so the room might be tilting slightly. You poke your tongue at the tooth. It still feels rough, but the throbbing has dulled. You believe the worm is gone. You pour the worms out into the dirt floor satisfied. But let's say the smoke didn't work. Let's say the pain comes back an hour later, which it will, because the nerve is dying. What is your next move? If you are brave, you might try to burn the worm directly. You would take a needle or a fine iron wire, heat it in the candle flame until it is red hot, and then jam it directly into the cavity. The goal is to cauterize the nerve or kill the worm. The smell of burning tooth pulp is horrific, and the pain is blinding. But if you succeed in destroying the nerve, the toothache actually stops. You have performed a medieval root canal without anesthesia. Or, if you are more superstitious, you might try transfer magic. You find a nail. You pick your gum with it until it bleeds. Then, you hammer that bloody nail into a healthy oak tree. The belief is that you have transferred the spirit of the pain into the tree. The tree will suffer now, and you will be free. Just don't ever touch that nail again, or the pain will jump back into you. Historians still argue regarding the tooth worm metaphor. Did they literally believe in a bug, or was worm just a linguistic term for the nerve? Some scholars point out that nerve tissue, when pulled from a tooth, looks like a white thread or a worm. Perhaps the ancients saw the nerve and assumed it was a parasite. However, the illustrations in medical texts are quite specific. They draw worms with heads and tails. And the treatments, like eating bitter herbs to disgust the worm, imply they thought it had a sense of taste. It seems likely that for the average person, the worm was as real as the cow in the barn. The day drags on. The pain medication, the henbane smoke, wears off. The tooth continues to rot. Eventually, you will have to go to the barber and have it pulled. He will use a pair of pelicans, a claw-like tool to leverage it out. He might break your jaw in the process. He might leave a root fragment behind that causes a fatal infection. But that is a worry for another day. Right now, you are noticing something else. Maybe it's the smoke from the henbane, or the smoke from the fireplace, or just the accumulated trauma of the last few days. But your vision is getting blurry. You rub your eyes. It's not just a fuzziness. It's a cloudiness. It feels like you are looking through a dirty window pane. You look at the candle flame, and it has a halo around it. You look at your hand, and the edges are indistinct. You are developing a cataract. In the modern world, this is a routine outpatient procedure. You go in, they use a laser and ultrasound, they replace the lens, and you go home with 20/20th vision. In the Middle Ages, a cataract is a corrupt humor that has congealed in the eye. It is a wall that has formed between your soul and the world. And to fix it, you don't need a laser. You need a needle. A big, thick, sharp needle. And you need a surgeon who is willing to shove it directly into your eyeball while you are fully awake. You are about to experience couching. It is one of the most agonizing and high-stakes procedures in history. If the surgeon sneezes, you go blind. If he succeeds, you still might go blind from the infection a week later. But for a few glorious moments, you might see again. Prepare yourself. You are about to let a man stab you in the eye. You are sitting on a low stool in the center of a bustling market square, or perhaps in the back room of a barber shop that smells faintly of old blood and lavender. Your vision is clouded. The world has become a gray, indistinct smear, as if you are looking through a sheet of wax paper. The cataract, a waterfall of corrupt humor, as the Greeks called it, has fully formed over your pupil. You are effectively blind in one eye. Standing over you is a man who calls himself an oculist. He is a specialist, a traveling surgeon who moves from town to town, performing miracles and then leaving before the post-operative infections set in. He wears a coat adorned with eye motifs, a walking billboard for his services. He doesn't have a laser. He doesn't have sterile gloves. He has a needle, a thick, sharp, brass or iron needle about 6 inches long. Hold the head, he commands. An assistant steps behind you. He wraps his arms around your head, clamping it firmly against his chest. He pries your eyelids open with his fingers. You cannot blink. You cannot look away. You are forced to stare straight ahead with your good eye, while the bad eye waits for the metal. Look toward the nose, the oculist says. He brings the needle up. You see it coming. It is a terrifying silver glint in your peripheral vision. He rests his hand on your cheek to steady it. He positions the tip of the needle against the white of your eye, the sclera, just a few millimeters away from the colored iris. He doesn't count to 3. He pushes. Pop. You feel a sickening sensation of resistance giving way, like a needle piercing a grape. There is no pain in the eye itself. The sclera has few pain receptors, but there is a deep, visceral pressure that makes your stomach turn over. He has punctured the eyeball. The needle is now inside your eye. You can't see it, but you can feel it moving. He manipulates the handle. He is aiming for the lens, the cloudy, hardened disc that sits behind your pupil. In the modern world, we remove the lens, extraction, and replace it with plastic. In the Middle Ages, they didn't know how to extract it safely without the eye collapsing. So they did the next best thing. They moved it out of the way. This procedure is called couching. The goal is to knock the lens backward and down, shoving it deep into the vitreous jelly at the bottom of the eye. It is essentially sweeping the dirt under the rug. The oculist finds the lens with the needle tip. He pushes. You see a sudden, violent flash of light pressure on the retina. And then, a miracle happens. The cloud falls. Suddenly, light floods in. Shapes reappear. You can see the oculist's face. You can see the crowd. You can see the assistant's sweaty arm. The obstruction has been physically dislodged, and pushed down into the bottom of your eyeball. "Behold," the oculist proclaims to the crowd. He sees. You gasp. It works. You are cured. This is a mainstream historical fact. Couching was the standard treatment for cataracts for over 2,000 years, practiced in ancient Babylon, India, Greece, and throughout medieval Europe. It persisted well into the 18th century. It was quick, dramatic, and visibly effective immediately. The patient went from blind to sighted in seconds. It was the kind of spectacle that made careers and filled purses. But here is the catch. You are now aphakic. You have no lens. Your eye can no longer focus. You can see light and movement, and maybe large shapes, but everything is permanently blurry, like a camera with the focus ring stuck on infinity. To read or do close work, you would need thick convex glasses, which barely exist yet. But compared to total blindness, it feels like a gift from God. The oculist withdraws the needle. He places a pad of wool soaked in egg white or breast milk over your eye and binds it tight. Lie in the dark for 7 days, he instructs. Do not move. Do not cough. Do not sneeze. Why? Because if you jolt your head, the lens might float back up. Imagine having a loose marble rolling around inside your eyeball. If it pops back into place, you go blind again. This was called a rising cataract. If that happened, the oculist would have to come back and stab you again. But the real danger isn't the lens returning. It's what happens next. You have just had a non-sterile needle shoved into the center of your eye. The immune system has no presence inside the eyeball. It's an immune-privileged site, which means infections run wild. In about a week, you might develop endophthalmitis. Your eye will turn red, fill with pus, and essentially melt. Or the trauma might cause secondary glaucoma pressure, building up until it destroys the optic nerve. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. The success rate of couching was abysmal by modern standards, but surprisingly high by medieval ones. Some historical estimates suggest that about 40% of patients regained some useful vision. The other 60%? They went permanently blind or lost the eye entirely. But here's the kicker. Itinerant oculists were notorious scammers. The most famous was the Chevalier Taylor in the 18th century, who blinded Batch and Handel. These men would perform the surgery, collect the fee, and leave town immediately. By the time the patient's eye turned black and fell out a week later, the doctor was 3 villages away. It was a hit-and-run medical model. Historians still argue regarding the golden needle of the Middle Ages. Was couching a barbaric act of mutilation, or was it a rational surgical intervention? Some medical historians argue that given the lack of anesthesia and antiseptics, couching was actually the safest option available. Cutting open the cornea to remove the lens, extraction, would have almost certainly resulted in the eye's contents spilling out or total infection. By keeping the incision tiny, couching minimized the exposure to the air. It was a crude solution, but it respected the limitations of the technology. It was least harm surgery. You stumble away from the market, guided by a family member, your head wrapped in bandages. You are told to lie still. You spend the next few days in darkness, terrified of sneezing. Your eye throbs. It feels gritty. But when you peek out from under the bandage, you can still see light. You count yourself lucky. However, the stress of the surgery, the bloodletting, the lead poisoning, and the smoke inhalation has taken a toll on your immune system. You are run down. Your lymph nodes are working overtime. A few days later, you wake up and feel a lump. Not in your eye, but in your neck, right along the jawline. It is hard, swollen, and painless. Then you find another one in your armpit. These are your lymph glands swelling up. In the modern world, this could be mono, or a cat scratch, or lymphoma. In the Middle Ages, this particular presentation, swollen, hard lymph nodes in the neck, is known as the king's evil. It is scrofula, a form of tuberculosis affecting the lymph nodes. You panic. The apothecary's salves won't fix this. The surgeon's knife is too dangerous for the neck. The church says this is a punishment for sin. But there is one specific, divinely appointed individual who can cure this with a single touch. You don't need a doctor. You need a monarch. You are about to embark on a medical pilgrimage. You are going to travel to the capital, stand in a line with thousands of other sick peasants, and wait for the King of England or France to touch your face. You are about to participate in the ultimate intersection of politics, religion, and placebo. Get ready to line up for the royal touch. You are standing in the rain, your boots sinking into the mud of a courtyard that is vastly grander than anything you have ever seen before. You are not at the apothecary's shop. You are not at the barber surgeon's bloody table. You are outside the palace gates, possibly at Westminster or the Louvre in Paris, shivering in a queue that stretches for miles. You are here because the lump in your neck, the hard, swollen mass of lymph nodes, has not gone away. The poultices didn't work. The prayers to St. Roch didn't work. You have the King's evil. In modern medical terms, you have scrofula tuberculosis of the neck. It is a slow, disfiguring disease where the glands swell, sometimes burst, and leave ugly scars. It isn't usually fatal, but it is persistent and repulsive. Medieval medicine has no answer for it, but medieval theology does. You believe, as does everyone around you, that the king is not just a political leader. He is God's anointed deputy on earth. By virtue of the holy oil poured on his head at his coronation, he possesses a divine spark, a superpower. He can cure this specific disease simply by touching it. You shuffle forward. The line is a wretched parade of humanity. There are men with bandages wrapped around their throats, women holding children with weeping sores, and the elderly leaning on crutches. The air smells of wet wool and sickness. But there is no despair here. There is an electric buzz of anticipation. You aren't waiting for a doctor. You are waiting for a miracle. Finally, you reach the front of the line. You enter the Great Hall. The contrast is blinding. After the gray gloom of the rain, the hall is ablaze with beeswax candles and the shimmer of gold leaf. And there, sitting on a velvet throne or standing under a canopy of state, is the king. He looks tired, and for good reason. This is a mainstream historical fact. The practice of the royal touch was a massive logistical operation. Kings of England and France touched thousands of subjects. King Charles II of England, who reigned in the 17th century, touched over 92,000 people during his reign. That's an average of about 4,000 people a year. There were days when he would touch hundreds of scrofulous necks in a single sitting until he was physically exhausted. It was the ultimate retail politics. Nothing says I am the legitimate ruler, quite like curing the sick with your magic fingers. You kneel before him. A chaplain is reading scripture nearby. The king extends his hand. He doesn't wear a glove. He places his bare palm directly onto your swollen, infected neck. He strokes it gently, perhaps making the sign of the cross over the sore. I touch you, but God heals you. He might murmur, or simply recite a prayer in Latin. You feel a jolt, not of electricity, but of awe. The most powerful man in the world, a man who eats off gold plates and commands armies, is touching your gross neck infection. The psychological impact is immense. You feel a wave of warmth. You burst into tears. You are certain, in this moment, that the sickness is leaving you. But the treatment isn't just a touch. It comes with a souvenir. After the king lifts his hand, an attendant steps forward and hangs a ribbon around your neck. Attached to it is a gold coin. This is the angel. It's a gold coin minted specifically for this ceremony, stamped with the image of the Archangel Michael slaying a dragon. This isn't spending money. This is a talisman. You are instructed to wear it constantly. If you lose the coin, the disease will return. It is a physical battery, storing the king's healing power. Here is a quirky, fringe tidbit. The touch piece, the coin, became a highly sought-after item, even for people who weren't sick. It was holy currency. But the ceremony had a darker, practical side for the king. Physicians were actually employed as screeners at the door. Their job wasn't to diagnose you, but to make sure you were sick enough to be worth the king's time, but not so contagious that you'd kill the monarch. If you had the plague or smallpox, rejected. You had to have the specific, non-lethal, slow-moving scrofula to get the VIP treatment. The king wanted to look like a healer, not a martyr. You stumble out of the hall, clutching your gold coin. You feel lighter. The pain in your neck seems to have subsided. You walk home with your head held high, telling everyone that the king himself laid hands on you. And amazingly, over the next few months, your swelling might actually go down. Historians still argue regarding the efficacy of the royal touch. Obviously, the king didn't have magic hands. But scrofula is a fickle disease. It often goes into spontaneous remission on its own. It waxes and wanes. If the swelling happened to go down naturally, a few weeks after the touch, the king got the credit. If it didn't, the patient was blamed for lacking faith or losing their coin. Furthermore, the placebo effect of such a grand theatrical ritual, the gold, the incense, the royal presence was potent. Psychoneuroimmunology tells us that belief can boost the immune system. The king didn't cure the TB, but he might have lowered your stress hormones enough for your body to fight it a little better. However, some cynical historians argue it was pure propaganda. They point out that kings often ramped up the touching ceremonies during times of political instability. If people were questioning your right to the throne, you started curing people to prove God was on your side. It was healthcare as a PR stunt. You return to your village. You wear your angel coin day and night. The lump in your neck is still there, but maybe it's a bit smaller, or maybe you just stopped poking it so much. Either way, you have survived the king's evil. But as the weeks wear on, you realize that while the king can handle external lumps, he can't help with the deep internal aches that are starting to plague you. Your stomach is churning. Your bones ache. You feel a deep spiritual malaise that no gold coin can fix. You need something more potent than a living king. You need the power of the dead. You need a relic. You have heard of a shrine in a nearby cathedral that houses the finger bone of a martyr, or perhaps a vial of breast milk from the Virgin Mary. These objects are said to radiate virtuae, holy power that can burn away illness like radiation. You don't just want to see the relic. You want to get as close to it as possible. You want to touch it, kiss it, maybe even lick it. You are about to engage in the medieval obsession with holy matter. You are going to a place where hygiene goes to die, where thousands of sick people press their lips to the same piece of glass, hoping to catch a miracle. You stand outside the heavy wooden door of the neighbor's cottage. The screaming has subsided into low, rhythmic groans, which is arguably worse. You are terrified. In the Middle Ages, childbirth is not a medical procedure. It is a roll of the dice with the highest stakes imaginable. There are no antiseptics, no blood transfusions, and absolutely no C-sections, unless the mother is already dead and they are trying to save the soul of the infant. Entering that room is stepping onto a battlefield where the enemy is biology itself. You push the door open and slip inside. The room is stiflingly hot. The windows have been sealed shut with heavy tapestries or blankets. This isn't just to keep out the draft. It is to keep out the demons. Everyone knows that newborn babies and laboring mothers are porous to the spirit world. If you let a draft in, a fairy might swap the baby for a changeling, or a demon might slip into the mother's open womb. So you sweat in the dark, suffocating gloom. The room is crowded, but unlike the rest of medieval life, there are no men here. No husbands, no priests, and certainly no male physicians. This is the domain of the godsibs, the gossips. the female friends, relatives, and neighbors who have gathered to help. In the center of this female fortress is the midwife. She is likely an older woman, illiterate but experienced, armed with a bowl of warm water, some oil, and a bag of tricks that blurs the line between obstetrics and sorcery. The mother is exhausted. Labor has stalled. In a modern hospital, this is when they would start pitocin, or prep for surgery. Here, the midwife reaches into her bag. She doesn't pull out a drug. She pulls out a belt. This is the birthing girdle. It looks like a long, tattered strip of parchment or silk, darkened with the sweat and blood of 100 other women. It is covered in prayers, cryptic symbols, and perhaps images of the Virgin Mary. The midwife wraps it tightly around the mother's belly, directly over the baby bump. "Bind the flesh to release the life," she might mutter. This is a mainstream historical fact. The church, usually so strict about magic, was the biggest dealer in these girdles. Many monasteries and abbeys claimed to possess the original belt of the Virgin Mary. There were several originals floating around Europe. They would rent these relics out to wealthy women in labor. For a fee, a monk would bring the holy belt to your house, let you wear it for the delivery, and then take it back. It was spiritual rental equipment. The idea was that the belt acted as a physical barrier against pain and a spiritual ramp for the baby. If you couldn't afford the Virgin's belt, you used a parchment scroll inscribed with prayers, a textual girdle. You watch as the mother clutches the parchment strip. She believes in it. And because she believes in it, her panic subsides slightly. Her breathing slows. The placebo effect is the only pain relief she has. But the belt isn't working fast enough. The baby is still stuck. The midwife needs something stronger. She reaches for a small, rattling rock. This is the Aetites, or eagle stone. It is a hollow geode with a smaller loose stone rattling inside it. The logic of sympathetic magic is at play here. The stone is pregnant. It has another stone inside it. Therefore, it has power over pregnancy. The midwife takes the stone and ties it to the mother's thigh. Why the thigh? Because gravity. The belief is that the stone has a magnetic pull on the infant. By tying it to the leg, it draws the baby down the birth canal. But here is the critical part. As soon as the baby is born, you must immediately rip the stone off the thigh and tie it to the mother's chest. If you don't, the stone's power will be too strong, and it will draw the uterus right out of the body, a prolapse. It is a magical magnet that you have to manage with split-second timing. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. The use of birthing charms got incredibly weird. Some midwives would write magical words like Sater, Aripo, Tenet, Opera, Rhodes, a famous Latin palindrome square, on a piece of cheese or butter, and feed it to the mother. The idea was that the holy words, once digested, would force the baby out. Imagine being in 10/10 pain and having someone force-feed you a piece of magic cheese. Other recipes called for the mother to drink water that had been used to wash the husband as trousers, presumably to invoke his authority to order the baby to exit. The hours drag on. The heat in the room is unbearable. The smell of vinegar, used to revive the fainting mother, mixes with the metallic scent of blood. Finally, with a guttural scream that seems to shake the wattle walls, the baby arrives. The midwife catches the child. She cuts the cord, but she doesn't check the Apgar score. She checks the call. If the baby is born with part of the amniotic sac covering its face, a call, it is a sign of immense luck. That piece of skin will be dried and sold to sailors as a charm against drowning. The mother collapses back onto the bed. She has survived. But she isn't safe yet. The lying-in period lasts for weeks. She is considered unclean and vulnerable. She cannot enter a church until she has been churched, a ceremony of purification. Until then, she is in a spiritual quarantine. Historians still argue regarding the reputation of the medieval midwife. The popular trope, fueled by later witch hunt hysteria, is that midwives were constantly accused of witchcraft, baptizing babies to the devil, or making potions from placenta. However, many scholars argue that this is a myth created by later male physicians trying to push women out of medicine. In the Middle Ages, midwives were actually respected, licensed by the church, and considered essential experts. They were the only ones allowed to perform emergency baptisms if the baby was dying. They weren't hiding in the shadows. They were the pillars of the community. You step out of the birthing room, gasping for fresh air. You feel shaken. You have seen the raw edge of life and death. The magical girdles, the eagle stones, the magic cheese. It all seems ridiculous to you. But then you realize, when you are in that level of pain and fear, you will hold on to anything. If someone told you a piece of cheese would save your life, you'd eat the cheese. The village returns to its normal rhythm. The baby is swaddled, tightly, as we recall. The mother recovers. But not everyone recovers. Sometimes after the trauma of birth, or perhaps due to the wandering womb. Yes, they thought the uterus moved around the body like an animal. A person's mind would break. Or perhaps it's the guy who got the hole drilled in his head. He isn't acting right. He is shouting at invisible people. He is tearing at his clothes. In the modern world, we see a mental health crisis requiring therapy and medication. In the Middle Ages, they see only one thing. The hole in the head wasn't big enough. The amulets didn't work. The problem isn't biological. It is theological. The patient is possessed. You are about to witness the treatment for madness. And unlike the gentle placebo of the birthing girdle, this treatment is loud, violent, and involves a lot of holy water. You thought the physical cures were bad? Wait until you see how they treat the soul. You stand outside the heavy wooden door of the neighbor's cottage. The screaming has subsided into low, rhythmic groans, which is arguably worse. You are terrified. In the Middle Ages, childbirth is not a medical procedure. It is a roll of the dice with the highest stakes imaginable. There are no antiseptics, no blood transfusions, and absolutely no C-sections, unless the mother is already dead and they are trying to save the soul of the infant. Entering that room is stepping onto a battlefield where the enemy is biology itself. You push the door open and slip inside. The room is stiflingly hot. The windows have been sealed shut with heavy tapestries or blankets. This isn't just to keep out the draft. It is to keep out the demons. Everyone knows that newborn babies and laboring mothers are porous to the spirit world. If you let a draft in, a fairy might swap the baby for a changeling, or a demon might slip into the mother's open womb. So you sweat in the dark, suffocating gloom. The room is crowded, but unlike the rest of medieval life, there are no men here. No husbands, no priests, and certainly no male physicians. This is the domain of the godsibs, the gossips, the female friends, relatives, and neighbors who have gathered to help. In the center of this female fortress is the midwife. She is likely an older woman, illiterate but experienced, armed with a bowl of warm water, some oil, and a bag of tricks that blurs the line between obstetrics and sorcery. The mother is exhausted. Labor has stalled. In a modern hospital, this is when they would start pitocin, or prep for surgery. Here, the midwife reaches into her bag. She doesn't pull out a drug. She pulls out a belt. This is the birthing girdle. It looks like a long, tattered strip of parchment or silk, darkened with the sweat and blood of 100 other women. It is covered in prayers, cryptic symbols, and perhaps images of the Virgin Mary. The midwife wraps it tightly around the mother's belly, directly over the baby bump. Bind the flesh to release the life, she might mutter. This is a mainstream historical fact. The church, usually so strict about magic, was the biggest dealer in these girdles. Many monasteries and abbeys claimed to possess the original belt of the Virgin Mary. There were several originals floating around Europe. They would rent these relics out to wealthy women in labor. For a fee, a monk would bring the holy belt to your house, let you wear it for the delivery, and then take it back. It was spiritual rental equipment. The idea was that the belt acted as a physical barrier against pain and a spiritual ramp for the baby. If you couldn't afford the Virgin's belt, you used a parchment scroll inscribed with prayers a textual girdle. You watch as the mother clutches the parchment strip. She believes in it. And because she believes in it, her panic subsides slightly. Her breathing slows. The placebo effect is the only pain relief she has. But the belt isn't working fast enough. The baby is still stuck. The midwife needs something stronger. She reaches for a small, rattling rock. This is the Aetites, or eagle stone. It is a hollow geode with a smaller loose stone rattling inside it. The logic of sympathetic magic is at play here. The stone is pregnant. It has another stone inside it. Therefore, it has power over pregnancy. The midwife takes the stone and ties it to the mother's thigh. Why the thigh? Because gravity. The belief is that the stone has a magnetic pull on the infant. By tying it to the leg, it draws the baby down the birth canal. But here is the critical part. As soon as the baby is born, you must immediately rip the stone off the thigh and tie it to the mother's chest. If you don't, the stone's power will be too strong, and it will draw the uterus right out of the body, a prolapse. It is a magical magnet that you have to manage with split-second timing. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. The use of birthing charms got incredibly weird. Some midwives would write magical words like Sater Aripo Tenet Opera Rhodes, a famous Latin palindrome square, on a piece of cheese or butter, and feed it to the mother. The idea was that the holy words, once digested, would force the baby out. Imagine being in 10 tenths pain and having someone force-feed you a piece of magic cheese. Other recipes called for the mother to drink water that had been used to wash the husband's trousers, presumably to invoke his authority to order the baby to exit. The hours drag on. The heat in the room is unbearable. The smell of vinegar, used to revive the fainting mother, mixes with the metallic scent of blood. Finally, with a guttural scream that seems to shake the wattle walls, the baby arrives. The midwife catches the child. She cuts the cord, but she doesn't check the Apgar score. She checks the call. If the baby is born with part of the amniotic sac covering its face, a call, it is a sign of immense luck. That piece of skin will be dried and sold to sailors as a charm against drowning. The mother collapses back onto the bed. She has survived. But she isn't safe yet. The lying-in period lasts for weeks. She is considered unclean and vulnerable. She cannot enter a church until she has been churched, a ceremony of purification. Until then, she is in a spiritual quarantine. Historians still argue regarding the reputation of the medieval midwife. The popular trope, fueled by later witch hunt hysteria, is that midwives were constantly accused of witchcraft, baptizing babies to the devil, or making potions from placenta. However, many scholars argue that this is a myth created by later male physicians trying to push women out of medicine. In the Middle Ages, midwives were actually respected, licensed by the church, and considered essential experts. They were the only ones allowed to perform emergency baptisms if the baby was dying. They weren't hiding in the shadows. They were the pillars of the community. You step out of the birthing room, gasping for fresh air. You feel shaken. You have seen the raw edge of life and death. The magical girdles, the eagle stones, the magic cheese. It all seems ridiculous to you. But then you realize, when you are in that level of pain and fear, you will hold on to anything. If someone told you a piece of cheese would save your life, you'd eat the cheese. The village returns to its normal rhythm. The baby is swaddled tightly, as we recall. The mother recovers. But not everyone recovers. Sometimes after the trauma of birth, or perhaps due to the wandering womb. Yes, they thought the uterus moved around the body like an animal. A person's mind would break. Or perhaps it's the guy who got the hole drilled in his head. He isn't acting right. He is shouting at invisible people. He is tearing at his clothes. In the modern world, we see a mental health crisis requiring therapy and medication. In the Middle Ages, they see only one thing. The hole in the head wasn't big enough. The amulets didn't work. The problem isn't biological. It is theological. The patient is possessed. You are about to witness the treatment for madness. And unlike the gentle placebo of the birthing girdle, this treatment is loud, violent, and involves a lot of holy water. You thought the physical cures were bad? Wait until you see how they treat the soul. You leave the birthing chamber, stepping away from the heavy, mystical atmosphere of girdles and eagle stones, only to find that the village is not at peace. A commotion is drawing a crowd near the churchyard, or perhaps the village square. You hear shouting, not the rhythmic screams of labor, but the chaotic, fractured yelling of a mind untethered. You push through the onlookers. In the center of the circle, a man is bound with heavy ropes to a wooden post or a chair. He is thrashing, spitting, and speaking in a voice that sounds guttural and strange. His eyes are rolling back in his head. In the modern world, a psychiatrist might diagnose him with schizophrenia, bipolar mania, or perhaps severe epilepsy. He needs antipsychotics, compassion, and stability. But in the Middle Ages, the diagnosis is binary. Either his humors are burnt to a crisp medical madness, or his soul has been hijacked. And judging by the priest standing over him with a bucket of water and a stole, the verdict is in. He is possessed. You are about to witness the medieval solution to mental health crisis: the exorcism. This isn't just a religious ceremony. It is considered a medical intervention. The logic is terrifyingly simple. If the mind is broken, it's because a foreign entity, a demon, has moved in. And demons are squatters. They don't leave nicely. You have to make the host body so uncomfortable, so painful, and so holy that the demon decides to evict itself. The priest steps forward. He splashes the man with freezing holy water. The man screams a reaction the crowd interprets as the demon burning, but is likely just the shock of ice water hitting bare skin. The priest begins the conjuratio. He isn't counseling the man. He is shouting at the invisible intruder. Exorcism est, omnis immundus spiritus. The volume is deafening. Bells are rung close to the man's ears to disorient the evil spirit. Incense-heavy, choking clouds of frankincense and myrrhs swung directly into his face to suffocate the bad air. Man is physically restrained, his limbs chafing against the ropes. You watch, horrified, as the treatment escalates. The priest might strike the man with a bundle of willow branches or a leather strap. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact. Physical punishment was a standard treatment for madness. It wasn't necessarily viewed as abuse in the sadistic sense. It was viewed as distraction or chastisement. The belief was that the demon hid deep inside the body. By inflicting pain on the flesh, you were whipping the demon, not the person. You were beating the bad out of them. Medieval hospitals, like Bedlam, St. Mary of Bethlehem in London, were essentially prisons where the distracted were chained to walls and often dunked in cold water baths. Shock therapy, centuries before electricity, to reset their heated brains. You wince as the man struggles. The priest demands the demon's name. The man babbles nonsense. The crowd gasps, convinced they hear Aramaic or Latin. In reality, it's likely glossolalia gibberish caused by a misfiring temporal lobe. But the theater of the exorcism requires a villain, and the man's illness is providing the perfect script. But what if the priest fails? What if the demon is stubborn? Then the village might turn to a more surgical solution. You see a traveling doctor step forward. He isn't a priest. He looks more like a conjurer or a charlatan. He inspects the man's head. He declares that the madness isn't a spirit. It's a solid object. A stone. The stone of folly, he announces. It is pressing on his brain. I must cut it out. You watch as the ropes are tightened. The doctor produces a small knife. He makes an incision in the man's forehead. Blood runs down into the patient's eyes. The doctor digs around with his fingers or a pair of forceps. He grunts with effort. Then, with a flourish, he pulls it out. He holds up a small, bloody pebble. "Behold," he shouts. The madness is removed. The crowd cheers. The patient, exhausted by blood loss and shock, slumps over. He is quiet now. The cure has worked, mostly because he is about to pass out. Here is a quirky, fringe tidbit. The extraction of the stone of madness, or Lubbert Das, was a widespread medical scam depicted in famous paintings by Hieronymus Bosch and others. In Bosch's painting, the stone being removed is actually a flower, a tulip or water lily, symbolizing that the patient is being duped. Traveling quacks would palm a stone, cut the patient's forehead, and then reveal the stone they had been holding the whole time. It was a placebo surgery performed for entertainment and profit. The tragedy is that the patient, believing the cause of their misery was gone, might actually feel better for a few days, until the placebo wore off or the wound got infected. You look at the bloody stone in the quack's hand. You look at the trembling, traumatized patient. You realize that mental health care here is simply a system of externalizing internal pain. They can't handle the idea that the mind can turn on itself, so they invent stones and demons to explain it. It makes the invisible visible. It makes the unmanageable manageable. But let's say the patient isn't mad in the violent sense. Let's say they are just ... sad, deeply, profoundly lethargic. They won't eat. They won't speak. They stare at the wall. This is melancholy. And the cure for this is arguably even weirder. The physician might prescribe music, hiring a lute player to sit by the bed, mimicking David playing for King Saul. This is actually quite humane. But if that fails, they might prescribe a diet of moist foods to counteract the dry, black bile. You might be force-fed poached pears and wine. Or, if the doctor is a traditionalist, he might suggest that the patient is suffering from love sickness, amor herios. This was a legitimate medical diagnosis. The cure? If you couldn't marry the object of your affection, the doctor might suggest distraction, travel, or, in extreme cases, hiring a sex worker to purge the built-up seed that was pressing on the heart. Yes, doctors literally prescribed casual sex as an antidepressant. Historians still argue regarding the medieval understanding of mental illness. For a long time, we assumed they only saw demons. But a closer look at court records shows a legal distinction between non-compos mentis, not of sound mind, due to natural causes, like a fever or old age, and demonic possession. If you killed someone while mad, you were often pardoned or given a lighter sentence because you lacked intent. This suggests they understood that the brain could break just like a leg could break. The exorcisms were the headline grabbers, but the daily reality was often families quietly caring for their innocents at home, keeping them safe from the fire and the river. The commotion in the square dies down. The bound man is untied and led away, weeping, his forehead bandaged where the stone was removed. You feel a heavy pit in your stomach. You have seen how they treat the mind with fear, violence, and trickery. But your own physical condition is deteriorating. The stress of watching the exorcism has aggravated your stomach. You feel weak. You feel like you are bleeding internally, perhaps an ulcer from the stress, or the lingering effects of the lead poisoning. You need something powerful. You need a medicine that contains the very essence of life force. And in the medieval logic of cures, the best way to preserve your life is to consume the preserved life of someone else. You are about to enter the darkest aisle of the medieval pharmacy. You aren't buying herbs. You aren't buying stones. You are buying a jar of brown powder that used to be a person. You are about to become a cannibal for your health. Get ready to eat the dead. You stumble away from the exorcism in the village square. your hand clutching your stomach. The spectacle of the possessed man was disturbing, but your own internal crisis is becoming impossible to ignore. You feel weak. You feel a deep, gnawing pain in your gut, perhaps an ulcer aggravated by stress, or maybe the lingering effects of the heavy metals you applied earlier are causing internal hemorrhaging. You are coughing up a little blood. In the medieval diagnostic manual, this is a flux of the blood. It means your life force is leaking out from the inside. You need a coagulant. You need something that stops flow, something that preserves and hardens. You return to the apothecary. You ignore the jars of herbs. You ignore the lead paste. You point to the jar on the high shelf, the one you glanced at earlier, but were too squeamish to buy. The mumia, you whisper. The apothecary nods with respect. This is the top shelf stuff. This is the medicine of kings. He brings down the jar. Inside is a dark, resinous, brownish-black powder. It smells faintly of spices, cinnamon, meringue, something else. Something like asphalt or tar. You pay a steep price for a few ounces. You take it back to your cottage. You mix the powder into a cup of wine, or perhaps rub it into a paste with honey. You lift the cup. You are about to consume human remains. You drink. It's gritty. It tastes bitter, aromatic, and distinctly earthy. As you swallow, you tell yourself that you are absorbing the ancient, preserved vitality of a pharaoh. This is a mainstream historical fact. Mumia, or mummy powder, was a staple of the European pharmacopoeia from the 12th century until the 18th century. It was listed in the catalogs of the Merck Pharmaceutical Company as late as the early 1900s. The demand was insatiable. Thousands of mummies were dug up from the necropolises of Egypt, ground into dust in industrial mills, and shipped to London, Paris, and Venice to be eaten by the sick. King Francis I of France carried a pouch of mummy powder with him at all times in case of accidents. It was the aspirin of the aristocracy. But why? How did perfectly rational people convince themselves that cannibalism was healthcare? It started with a linguistic accident. The Persian word mumia referred to bitumen, a naturally occurring black, tar-like substance found in rocks. Bitumen was indeed used in ancient medicine to set broken bones and stop bleeding, because it's sticky and creates a seal. When Europeans encountered Egyptian mummies, they noticed the bodies were blackened and preserved with a similar tar-like substance. They confused the two. They assumed the mummies were made of bitumen. So the logic went, bitumen cures wounds. Mummies are made of bitumen. Therefore, eating mummies cures wounds. But then the logic morphed into something more mystical. They reasoned that the ancient Egyptians were masters of preservation. They had unlocked the secret of stopping decay. By eating a body that had refused to rot for 3,000 years, you were ingesting the very essence of anti-decay. You were transferring their immortality into your own sick, dying body. It was a literal consumption of time. You sit by the fire, waiting for the pharaoh to fix your ulcer. You feel a bit nauseous likely, because you just ate a cocktail of human flesh, asphalt, and linen wrappings. But you also feel a strange psychological comfort. You have taken the ultimate medicine. However, there is a very high probability that you aren't eating an ancient Egyptian at all. You are likely eating a peasant who died last week in Cairo. This brings us to a quirky fringe tidbit. The supply of genuine ancient mummies eventually ran dry, but the demand in Europe kept rising. So unscrupulous merchants in Alexandria set up mummy factories. They would take the bodies of executed criminals, slaves or plague victims, stuff them with straw and asphalt, bake them in the sun until they turned brown and leathery, and then grind them up. They sold this fresh mummy powder as the real deal. One merchant famously confessed that he had been selling the bodies of lepers as high-grade medicine for years. You think you're eating Ramses II. You're actually eating a guy named Steve, who died of leprosy in 1540. And it wasn't just for medicine. The obsession with mummies spilled over into art. A popular pigment used by painters, including the pre-Raphaelites, was called mummy brown. It was literally made by mixing ground-up mummy flesh with oil paint. It gave a rich, warm, transparent brown glaze that was perfect for shadows and flesh tones. So, when you look at a beautiful 18th century painting in a museum, you might be looking at a smeared corpse. The practice only stopped when artists finally realized what it was made of. There is a famous story of the artist Edward Burne-Jones finding out his tube of paint was a person. He was so horrified he gave the tube a solemn burial in his garden. You finish your cup of mummy wine. You wait. The bleeding in your stomach doesn't stop. In fact, it might be getting worse because the bitumen is irritating your lining and the bacterial load of the fresh corpse powder is assaulting your system. The like cures like theory has failed you. Consuming preservation didn't preserve you. Historians still argue regarding the medical cannibalism of Europe. Some scholars argue it was a form of colonial dominance, literally consuming the bodies of the colonized. Others argue it was deeply rooted in the Christian tradition of the Eucharist, eating the body of Christ, making the leap to medicinal cannibalism much smaller for the medieval mind than it is for us. If eating God saves your soul, eating a magical ancient human might save your body. It was a consistent, if gruesome, worldview. The pain in your gut persists. You are desperate. You have tried plants, minerals, animal waste, and now human remains. Nothing is working. You start to think that maybe the problem isn't the medicine. Maybe the problem is the target. You look at the scratch on your arm, the one that started this whole mess days ago. It's still inflamed, despite the mercury. You think back to the rusty nail or the knife that cut you. Where is that object now? A wild thought occurs to you. A thought born of the sympathetic magic worldview. Maybe you shouldn't be treating the wound on your arm. Maybe you should be treating the object that inflicted the wound. If there is a spiritual link between the weapon and the injury, then healing the weapon might heal you. This is the theory of the weapon salve. It sounds insane. It defies all laws of physics and biology. But in the 16th and 17th centuries, it became a fiercely debated scientific theory. You are about to perform a medical procedure on a knife. You are going to ignore your rotting arm. Take the rusty blade and slather it with ointment. Wrap it in clean linen and keep it warm. And the craziest part? It might actually work better than treating the wound. Why? Because while you are busy pampering the knife, you are finally leaving the wound alone to heal itself, without rubbing dung or lead into it. You scramble to find the knife. You are going to cure the metal to save the flesh.